council meeting of the Town of Edgewood's Council to order. And first item on the agenda is a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Thank you, everyone. First item is approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve this afternoon's agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll go ahead and second.
I do.
Counselor?
I just want to make a motion to add public comment following the presentation today.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second to add public comment to today's agenda. How do you vote? Counselor Jaramillo?
Aye.
Counselor Holly?
Aye.
Counselor Abraham?
Aye.
I guess we've got 3-4. I vote nay. Today's agenda is simply the presentation from Mr. Michael Sharp from Research and Polling, Inc. We will add public discussion after the discussion item from Mr. Sharp. I don't think today was the day for a cross-examination of Mr. Sharp, but I think that's about to happen. So be prepared, Mr. Sharp. Today, I want to make sure that everyone understands that the information that Research and Polling is presenting to us has not been presented to anyone in the administration, nor has it been presented to any of the counselors. We are here today for that first presentation of that information. Because of the lawsuit that Councilors Jaramillo and Abraham have brought against myself and Councilor Holly, we have been commanded to make things happen. However, one of the things that was alleged, alleged is not a word, was that we were doing things and dragging our feet. Well, we're not dragging our feet. In fact, I believe we might be the first community in the state of New Mexico to do any kind of districting this year. I'm not exactly sure of that, but I have checked with our county clerk, and she has not gotten information to do districting yet. And I don't think anybody else in the state has done any. So we are the first community in the state, as far as I know, to do districting. Much to the surprise, I think, perhaps, of some folks on the council. And with that, I will hand this over to Mr. Sharp with one other caveat. That being that the presentation that he is about to give us will be posted after and will be available for the public to view. However, the presentation, from what I understand, on screen for some folks is going to be difficult to see. With that caveat, I will hand it over to Mr. Michael Sharp from Research and Polling, Inc. Mr. Sharp?
Thank you very much, counselors and members of the public. Just a quick intro. My name is Michael Sharp. I'm Vice President at Research and Polling. And we've been asked by the town administration to come up with some redistricting plans for the council's consideration. It's my understanding that due to past election that the town is going to a commissioner manager form of government requiring 5 commissioners, and that also would mean that the town would be divided into 5 districts. So just with that said, I'm going to try to keep this relatively brief. Sometimes these redistricting presentations can run an hour. So I'll try to maybe keep it less than that. And at points I can stop and ask for questions. But I'd like to just go through the basic guidelines of redistricting and kind of what the guidelines are that we use to follow to draw the districts. Regardless of how the town has gotten to this point, I just wanted to say my purpose here is to present some district options to the town for its consideration. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share the presentation. So hopefully everybody sees the Town of Edgewood City Commission Redistricting Plan 2021. And let's go roll right into this. So just a little bit about us. We've done redistricting for a number of years. 40 years, we have a lot of experience. I think I started redistricting back in 91, 92. So that would make the 90, 2000, and 2010, those would be three. This will be my fourth decade of doing redistricting for various entities around the state, both the local level and the state level. We completed a ton of redistricting projects over these past number of decades. And so hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions about the redistricting process. So one of the important things to remember is who gets to redistrict and who's responsible for what your districts look like. In normal years, the U.S. House of Representatives are Congress people, the state legislature, state House and state Senate, and now the Public Education Commission. Those are all the responsibilities of the state legislature passing legislation during a session, and then the governor signing it. In normal years, it does get to the governor's desk. In past decades, they have gone to litigation just because there was not an agreement between the legislature and the governor. But in normal years, it would get to the governor's desk and would potentially be signed. The county commission districts, relevant to the Edgewood area, Bernalillo, Sunval, Santa Fe counties, does have county commissioners, districts that are districted as single-member districts. And those are all the responsibility of the county commissions, respectively. So the Santa Fe County Commission districts are the responsibility of the Santa Fe County Commission. When we're looking at city councils and city commissions, those are the responsibilities of the respective city governments. And then the same applies to local school board. So for Moriarty Edgewood Schools, those districts that they create, it's their responsibility to pass the plan. The whole point of this slide really is to say that this decision of what your districts look like is up to the town. The state legislature shouldn't be able to come in and tell you what your districts look like, nor should the county commission and any other entities like that. This is your responsibility to figure out what your districts look like. So basic redistricting timeline. April 1st officially last year was the 2020 Census Day, and then, which was complicated by the COVID-19 pandemic and forced a lot of delays with respect to the census data itself. In a normal year, the 2020 census data would have been released probably by now. Actually, it would have been released by the middle of March in 2021, but because of COVID-19, they actually pushed that data back to being released in August or September. And so what does that mean for Edgewood? It means that when creating these districts, that the best data that we have available is actually based on the 2010 census data. The 2020 census data is not slated to come out until August or September. Well, that presents a challenge with respect to your municipal elections. Your filing date is in August. I believe it might be the 24th, right around there. And so if your filing date is the 24th, then that makes it really difficult to create districts based on 2020 census data, since it will probably be released after the filing date. So basically in this whole process, at this moment, we're forced to use the data from the 2010 census. So that's important to keep in mind, and that with respect to other municipalities and other counties, those that have their elections in March will be using the 2020 census data to redistrict, and some of the others that have their elections during the local election, they will district next year using 2020 census data. And then, of course, this is in preparation for the November 21 municipal election. So briefly, what is redistricting? And this is kind of a timely topic now this year. In general, it's basically the process of drawing or redrawing lines to figure out which voters live in which districts and which voters are represented by the folks who they have elected. And in terms of the municipalities, well, why do you district? There's a couple of different reasons. One, state statute, if your municipality happens to have more than 10,000, according to the most recent census, then by statute you're required to redistrict. There are options for municipalities to redistrict if they have less than 10,000. Edgewood, according to the 2010 census, has about 5,900 people. That's including the annexations that occurred over the past decade. Another reason for redistricting could be moving from at-large to a districted system. And it's my understanding that's what the town is contemplating right now and is looking at. So you have 4 elected councilors, you have a commissioner-manager structure coming up, requiring 5 districts, and so that's a change with respect to the structure of the government, and that's another reason why we can do this. So when do we redistrict? Typically it's after the decennial census is released, and we get to use the most current population data. In this case, just to reiterate, it's the data from the 2010 census. So I have some principles of redistricting I wanted to go over real quick, hopefully. There are 5 basic principles of redistricting. And I like to think of these as if you're trying to build a stable structure, or say a table, these first 4 criteria or principles are kind of like your table legs. They provide a solid base. And then the 5th one is the communities of interest. I was like, what's your tabletop to look like in the end? So when you're drawing districts, you must pay attention to equal population, voting, minority voting rights, compactness, and contiguity. Those are the things that provide a solid foundation for your plan. And then the communities of interest, once you have that solid foundation, then we can start looking at different ways to design or build these districts. So with respect to equal population, one of the questions that comes up is, who gets counted? And the simple answer, one-word answer, is everyone. But we also like to make sure that everyone understands that includes adults, kids, college students in the dorms, those who are incarcerated, wherever it happens to be. It also includes non-citizens, documented, undocumented immigrants, foreign students. So everybody who's living within the United States is counted, regardless of status. And they are counted in the place where they live and sleep most of the time. So with respect to, say, the college students, they are counted at the dorms. That's where they are living at the time of the census. That's where they're living and sleeping most of the time. And so they're counted at the dorms instead of, say, their mom and dad's house, their parents' house. There is a constitutional mandate to redistrict. 4 basic cases that kind of to lay the foundation of, well, can entities be sued with respect to equal population and be forced to district? They can. It applies to legislatures, it applies to local entities, it applies to how equal the districts have to be in population. So those first 4 cases kind of laid out these criteria saying, all right, well, if you redistrict, you have to district such that the districts are equal in population. And it comes down to this concept of one person, one vote, so that no matter which district you live in within a town, that you have the same representation as anybody else. If you live in District 1, you have the same representation as if you lived in District 4. In essence, you have the same share of your representative or your councilor. So equal population equals equal representation. For congressional districts, it should be as equal as practicable, and basically that means when you create the congressional districts, you need to get as close to equal as possible. So if New Mexico has 2,100,000 people, ideally every single district would have 700,000 people. So 3 times 700,000 is hopefully 2.1 million. They are equal in population. With respect to the state legislature and city commissions and city councils, the courts have decided, well, there's a little more leeway. It's harder to create districts of perfect population when you're looking at smaller entities such as Edgewood, such as county commissions, even such as the state legislature. And so the courts have said, well, you don't have to have districts that are perfectly equal. They can have a total deviation of no more than 10%. And I'll get into this in just a moment. It basically means plus or minus 5% from the perfect population or the ideal population. So what is the ideal or perfect population for Edgewood? The total population divided by the number of districts. So according to the 2010 census, including the annexations, Edgewood has around 5,900 people divided by 5 for the number of commissioner districts that's going to, and that ends up with about 1,100, almost 1,200 people per district. And this is, again, total population, including kids and adults. Well, when I mentioned earlier about that 10% deviation, the court said you can be substantially equal at the level of the city government. That means when you take that perfect population, that ideal pop of 1177, you can go above or below that by about 5%. So you take 1177, add 58, that's your upper range. Subtract 58, that's your lower part of the range. So that in the end, as long as every district for Edgewood is between 1,119 and 1,235, then the courts have said, well, we consider your districts to be substantially equal, and that's in essence good enough. You don't have to have every district be 1,177. A question that comes up commonly is, well, I know you're looking at total population, what about adult population? What about registered voters? The equal population is based on total pop. It's not based on the number of registered voters in the districts. It's not based on adult population. That's been pretty clear. So as long as we fall within that range, it should be okay. Minority voting strength. This is in here to make sure that when creating districts, that any minority groups, ethnic language minority groups, have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. In New Mexico, those groups are Native Americans and Hispanics. African Americans is another large group in New Mexico, but for that particular population, for African Americans, they're not really large enough to create any sort of majority in a district. But for the Native Americans and Hispanic populations, then when you see this process talked about to the state legislature, this will be an important topic because of the diverse population in New Mexico. We just have to make sure that the minority pop has opportunities. And then when you create these districts, you can't use race or ethnicity as your only reason of creating the districts. For Edgewood, your population is, I'll say, roughly 20% Hispanic, and that population is roughly distributed evenly throughout the town. So there's really no way to create a district in which the Hispanic population is majority of any single district. So this is, I won't say it's not important, it's just something that isn't possible in terms of creating districts that are majority minority within Edgewood. One of the other, I guess the third pillar, or the third leg of our table is compactness. Different ways to measure compactness that are perfect refers to the shape and not necessarily the geographic size. You can have a really large district, but it's still a compact district. You can look at, if you ever looked at the legislative district map for New Mexico, you can look at the district that starts from Union County. It goes all the way down to Clovis. In Curry County, it's a really, really large district, but it's fairly compact in size. It doesn't look funny. So that's one thing to remember. Edgewood, you might have some districts that are smaller in size, but they could have the same population as another district that happens to be larger in size. So sometimes you hear people talking about large districts and saying that's not really compact, but in reality, you just look at it. And if it doesn't have funny looking figures, generally it's compact. It can also be affected, the compactness can be affected by the jurisdiction's outer boundary. I mean, you're familiar with Edgewood, the north part of the town up in, Berlin County, going to Sandoval County, and it's almost like a checkerboard on some places, and so the outer boundary isn't necessarily straight lines in terms of straight vertical or horizontal, and so that could affect the compactness, but mainly we like to look at the internal boundaries between the districts. So quick examples of compactness, these are all from 91, but they're relevant to each other and just describing them. You'll see that district on the left, that's New Mexico 3rd. It's pretty much stayed like that for the past 3 decades. It's pretty compact. It's following county lines. There's good reasons for looking the way it does. It's not a perfect square, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. When you're looking at the figure on the right, this was in Houston, Texas, and that green district in the middle, that's all one district. And that was drawn based on creating a majority Hispanic district. So basically, compactness was subordinated to race. The only reason the district looks like this is because of race. And because of that, it was deemed unconstitutional. There's that kind of purple one that kind of goes around the green. That's all one district as well. Kind of crazy looking. And then the red district below is North Carolina. That was also created by solely on race. That was also deemed unconstitutional. So we'll avoid creating really awkward looking districts like that. The fourth leg of the table of contiguity basically means every district has to be made up of one piece. You have to give to every other piece, every other part of the district, and not leave that district. The figure on the left, all those pieces are contiguous. Figure on the right, you'll notice that District A, the kind of light blue district, is broken into 2 pieces, and that's not contiguous. So I kind of like to say you have to be able to put your pencil on the map and get to every other part of the district without lifting up the pencil. So it's a decent test. Now that we have our 4 legs of the table, then we can look at everything else that you think of. And it could be respecting political subdivisions like precinct boundaries. You could look at neighborhoods. You can look at geographic boundaries, say major streets or roads or arroyos. You can look at other sorts of historical traditions, whether it's linguistic or cultural. You can look at, this isn't really applicable to Edgewood, but as you hear about redistricting in general this year, people may talk about, well, can we keep our district looking like it does today? So kind of the core existing districts. You can also look at where the current incumbents live and draw districts that say keep one incumbent or counselor or commissioner per district. You can do that, but you don't have to. It's not required to keep one incumbent per district. So one thing that we can look at is we can look at every single one of these principles, as long as those other ones, the first 4 that we talked about, as long as we pay attention to those and don't violate those. So one thing that I was looking at when drawing the district was, if you wanted to use I-40 as a hard boundary between districts and not cross it, well, if when I was looking at the population, I noticed, well, that area south of I-40 has about 1,600 people within the town. And if you recall, the ideal population for a district for Edgewood is about 1,200. So out of that 1,600 south of I-40, so that's enough population for one district plus a little bit more but it's not enough for 2 full districts. So by this very nature, any district that's kind of south of I-40, there might be one that you can keep south of I-40 completely, and the other one that takes up the rest of the population will have to cross north of I-40 and pick up population from the rest of Edgewood. Okay, so when looking at the plans, they're rarely perfect. This is a balancing act between all these. In some ways, they're conflicting. You want the district to be equal in population. You have to balance that against the communities of interest, like that I-40 example I gave you. You have to look at compactness and contiguity. And so because of that, there are multiple I guess, factors that you look at, and they could work against each other. You might find a plan that's perfect with one respect, but it might not be ideal in another respect. And you might make a change to a plan, and that might fix one particular thing you didn't like about it, but it might cause another problem. So it's a matter of trying to find a good balance between all these various criteria. And so these initial plans are mainly here to show you maybe some options that you could look at. They're not necessarily set in stone. And if you had any questions about them, or hey Michael, could you do this? Could you do that? Then I'm certainly willing to look at them and maybe present some modifications. So before I get into the plans, I wanted to see if there were any questions on the redistricting principles themselves. So just if you had any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem and Mr. Sharp, I do have a couple questions.
Councilor Jaramillo?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the public who's joined us, and Mr. Sharp. I appreciate your experience and your time today. I did want to ask, as far as the 2010 census number, you said that would be the basis for this. So I'm wondering if you've used any of your growth modeling or anything else to factor into the population at all, or are you going purely by the 2010 census plus the annexations?
I'm going purely, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor Jaramillo, I'm going purely by the 2010 census plus the annexation.
Okay. So how did you get the annexations in? Was it by census tracts?
So what I did was, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Jaramillo, I looked at the annexations and compared them against the census block boundaries, and where I was able to take those census blocks, I just brought in the census blocks that conform to the annexations, and they're actually pretty close. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the annexation boundaries over the past 10 years have matched up pretty well with the existing census geography and the population within that geography.
Okay, thank you. Also, this question came up at a previous meeting. Since the census will be issued in the fall, how soon will we be required to redistrict again? Can that be pushed out into the future, or is there a time limit that we have to redistrict again?
Okay, that's a good question. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Jaramillo, the statutes that they were just passed this past legislative session. I think it was Senate Bill 304 that also incorporated the redistricting commission or committee. That statute states that for those municipalities that have their elections during the local regular election in November, that they are required to redistrict following the release of the census data. They're required to redistrict in 2022. So required to redistrict in the calendar year after the year in which the data is released. So if the 2020 census data is released in 2021, then that means that those entities like Edgewood that have their elections in November 21, they must redistrict in 2022 using the 2020 census date.
Okay, so it would be required for us to issue or approve another redistricting plan based on the new census by December of 2022. Is that fair to say?
That's how I understand it, yes.
Yeah, okay. Also, the question had come up on single member districting, and we read the statute at our last meeting. I noticed you had a different statute, but for commission manager, I think it's 314.6.
Mm-hmm.
And does say that you may have single member districts instead of at large. Is that your understanding as well? Now, granted, I know that we have to have the 5 commissioner districts, but as far as how people vote, is that your understanding as well, that you are at large unless you elect to have single member districts?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Jaramillo, I did read that, and to be quite frank, I'm not sure how quite to interpret it. And I'm not necessarily an attorney, so I really wouldn't want to be, probably could be quoted on it, but held to that, because I noticed there is other language in the statutes that does kind of apply to this situation, but it's with respect to counties. And it says that if there's a county that they can district, and they have a choice, they have to have one, they have to have 3 county commissioners. Their population has to be less than 13,000, but if they meet those 2 criteria, they can divide up their county into 3 districts, but they have 2 options. One is that they do definitely go into single member districts where the commissioners must live within the district, and they're only elected or voted on by the people who live in that district. So kind of a traditional single member district. You live in and are elected by the district. But their other option is it's almost like a residency requirement, and it requires the people who want to run for office to live in their district, but they're elected countywide. So if you wanted to apply that to any, I just don't know if that's applicable to Edgewood. I was trying to find similar language that kind of specifies that sort of information in terms of applying to Edgewood, but theoretically in Union County, you can live in District 1, but everybody in the county votes for you. So that's, I'm sorry I can't give you any definitive answer, but I was trying to compare the 2 situations with the statutes with respect to the commissioner manager style versus county commissioners. So I was trying to find an equivalent for the commissioner manager, and I just may not have been able to find it. So that's a really long answer to saying I'm really not sure.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think that we could be the first, maybe the first and only municipality that has gone this route, unless you're aware of another. But everyone that I've talked to cannot remember this ever happening. However, when I say that, I mean going from mayor, council to commission manager. Obviously, there's other municipalities that still vote at large. One of them is the city of Raton. And I didn't look in your client list to see have you had city of Raton in your, okay. So the clerk there had stated that they are a commission manager form of government. I'm just reading from his information here on my other screen. The city ordinance defines 5 districts, but because our population is below 10,000, a city commission candidate can run for office without residing in the district in which they are running, and citizens can vote at large for any and all city commissioner positions, regardless of which district the voter resides. And then another one too was TRC, and so they, as long as the voter is registered within the municipality, they can vote for any position. And so there's also another, let me see if I have information here. Aztec is the other, where the city commission is elected at large. And I think there are a few others as well, but those are the few that I have information on from the clerks. And so just wanted to kind of clarify that, because I noticed in your proposal or in the documentation that we had seen previously, it's stated in their single member districts. However, that decision has not yet been made by the town. So just wanted to let you, be aware of that. Do you think that that will change anything on your side of it at all? Does it matter how, where the people live, and as far as candidates, where they live and how they're elected, just in principle here? Does it matter to what you are doing for your purposes?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Jaramillo, I don't think so. I'm just drawing the districts, and I guess however the council wants to handle that and work with those districts, however you decide to make that decision on single member versus at large, it doesn't really impact me one way or the other. So I'm just trying to create districts that make some sense for the community.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Sharp from the councilors?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sharp, if you want to continue.
Great, thank you. So, thank you for the questions. It's good for me to see the perspectives of the communities that I'm working with, and before coming into the plan, maybe I went a little bit too soon, but that's all right. It's good to get the perspective of the folks who are making decisions as well. And I may live in Albuquerque, but I'm not an Edgewood resident, and I don't know Edgewood necessarily as well as you all do. And oops, hold on, something happened here. I'm not sure what happened. Hold on one sec.
We can still see your presentation.
Okay, that's good. I just had this notice on my screen saying it is pausing screen sharing. So let me do something here. Okay, sorry about that. I just want to say that it's good to get the perspective of the folks who live in the districts and live in the community. And so there might be something that I missed probably, but and so I welcome that sort of input. But the basic process, after we talked about the criteria, is we do like to talk about the ABCs, which we just did. We can get public input, we can get input from the elected officials, we can show the plans, we can revise the plans if needed, and then eventually the council would adopt a plan. Following choosing a plan, the voters are assigned to the correct districts, and we have an election resolution, filing dates, and then finally your election. So let's go right into the plan. I created really 3 plans, or 3.5, and this is plan A, and I'm kind of starting from scratch. And I think I can describe the boundaries in a little more detail as we go through them if you'd like. But this plan was just trying to create something where the districts are relatively compact. They seem to have made some sense. They seem to follow recognizable features, and then the populations are also equal. So District 1 is larger than the rest, but what that means is, because it's equal population to the others, there's not very much people living up in Bernalillo County or Sandoval or the northern part up there in Santa Fe County. Most of the population lives south of Frost. So it looks big. It may also look not very compact, but that's just because of the outer boundaries of Edgewood. But if you look at the inner boundary of District 1, where it shares a boundary with 2 and 3, that's a pretty straight line. And that's just FYI, that's Venus. And then because we're looking at equal population, it does go through that neighborhood that's right there at Venus and Mosley. And it does go up to Express, Kelly, Casey, and up to Mosley, and then to the Edgewood boundary. So it's a relatively straight line, not too bad. District 2, so I thought, well, we have a District 1, let's create a District 2 that's kind of off south and east of that. That's a relatively compact district as well. I'm going to go to the next slide that has a little bit closer view. And so you can see between 1 and 2, it goes through that neighborhood. When you look at District 2, again, that's a relatively compact district, trying to stick to major roads if possible, though north of Church it does follow Maple and Duncan, and that's mainly to keep the populations relatively equal, close in population. And so District 2, it does go, it's Venus, 344 on the western side, down to Dinkle, over to Quail Trail, over to Maple/Duncan, and then down to Williams Ranch, down to I-40. So that's the District 2 boundary. District 3, that northernmost square, is where your town government is located, along with the school and the fire station. And as maybe according to the census, there are 3 people living in that entire block, if you will. I think just right along the north side of Dinkle. Relatively compact district. It shares the boundary with 2, along Dinkle and Quail down the Church, Church west up to 344, and then hits I-40. So it's a relatively easy district to describe. Again, relatively equal in population with the rest. District 4, we've already kind of described its boundaries. We talked about 3 and 2. Remember I discussed the population south of I-40. It has too much population for one district, but not enough for 2 whole districts. And so this is where District 4 and 5 come along. I thought, well, if I can start drawing a district from the west to the east, how far can I go and create a full district? And so District 5, it does follow I-40 to 344, but I guess south of I-40, that's County Road 7 or Edgewood 7. And I would have liked to have gone straight down, all the way down to the county line. But if I did that, District 5 population would be too small. And so what happens is, it does have to go into the neighborhood, I think it's Calle Encantada, the street that kind of, a little loop. And it does follow the Calle Encantada down to the old municipal boundary, and then hits the municipal boundary, wraps around.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose?
No, something happened. Hello?
He's frozen.
I think we lost you momentarily, Mr. Sharp. We'll wait just a few moments to see if you come back.
Do you have trash to be taken out?
Mr. Sharp, are you back with us? We have lost Mr. Sharp. I think we might want to take a small break and see if we can contact him. I'm going to put us on hold for just a few minutes while we try and get Mr. Sharp back, and we'll continue.
Just telling I have a notification saying my network connection has been reestablished.
Welcome back.
Yeah, you know what? I really wonder how much I was talking, and then you couldn't hear me.
We kind of lost you right at District 5 when you were going up Route 66.
Oh my goodness, in Plan A?
Is he back? Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Okay,
I'm so sorry.
I think we're all back.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's go back to Plan A. Is this where we left off?
This is where we left off. You were describing District 5.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So district, I think I may, okay. So I talked about, let me go back to my notes here real quick. We talked about Calle Encantada.
Yes.
Okay.
You had just begun speaking about Cayenne.
Okay, well, I've had a little bit of practice, so I'll mention this again. But the reason why we had to follow Calle Encantada and Canario was because District 5 didn't have enough population, so we stayed west of Edgewood Road 7 or County Road 7. So we had to cross the road to the east and take up Calle Encantada to make up the population, so District 5 had enough. And so basically, Calle Encantada Centenario to the old municipal boundaries is what that little thing looks like that goes from 5 and goes on. So that is Plan A, and basically District 4 is kind of what's left over. The north side of Calle Encantada, south of Church, south of Maple and Duncan, and then west. I think it's Williams Ranch Road. It is possible within this particular plan, that if you wanted to make a slight modification, the deviations to this plan are all about, they're really, really good. They're maybe plus or minus 1%, plus or minus 2%, pretty close to zero deviation, so they're pretty equal in population. And it is possible that if you wanted to, reunite or unite that neighborhood right there at Venus and Mosley, put all those people into one district, you could put them into one. And it still stay within the plus or minus 5%, but instead of being, say, plus or minus 1 or plus or minus 0.5%, it'd be about plus or minus 3%. So this is that trade-off that sometimes we talk about. We can create districts that are more equal in population, but they might split an additional neighborhood that you would rather have it be kept together. So you can be a little less stringent, if you will, on the population deviations. You can expand them a little bit in order to unite neighborhoods in a single district. So if that's something you wanted to see, we could definitely take a look at putting those folks in that neighborhood back in the district, or in the District 1 from 2. It would just mean that the deviations would get a little bit bigger, but still fall within plus or minus 5%. Okay. I think I had almost gone through all of Plan B before realizing that I lost the connection. So Plan B is just something a little bit different. I thought, well, what happens if you create a more vertical District 3 that's west of Highway 344? And what happens if you created, say, a more southeastern district like District 2? And so this is, I guess, an example of kind of what happens when you start moving population from one district to another, and it can cause, like a ripple effect. So District 1, it used to go down to Venus in Plan A, between Venus and Hill Ranch. It lost that to District 3. District 1 now has too few people. It has to add population. So now it kind of swings down south of Venus to Dinkle. And it does go through, it has to split that neighborhood kind of around the airport, that private airport. And it does take some of the people in that area and puts it into District 1. The other folks go into District 2. And it's basically Homestead to Rainbow to Blanco are the three streets that district line follows in that area. So everybody south and east of that line is in 2. The other folks in that neighborhood are District 1. So sometimes when we try to create different options in different districts, we might solve one issue and we might keep one neighborhood intact. We might end up splitting a different one. So it's just a matter of our perspectives. So District 3 looks pretty good. It goes from Hill Ranch all the way down to Walker. It does cross the freeway. And that's Walker and where was it? Entrada del Norte. There we go. So south of the freeway, District 3 follows Entrada del Norte down to Walker and over to Edgewood County Road 7, and then straight up. District 2 we talked about a little bit. On District 2's east side, south of Dinkle, it follows Quail Trail down to I-40. District 5, because it lost some population to District 3, remember in Plan A, District 5 went all the way up to I-40. So that area between Walker and I-40 was in District 5. It lost it to 3, and now District 5 has to expand its population. So if you recall in Plan A, the District 5 was just a little bit, just Cayenne Cantada, but now it takes everybody south of that neighborhood. So now it goes further south to almost, I guess, that's Hillside. So it adds some people there. The reason it looks funny is because that's one census block. That one census block goes, all the way from County Road 7 to Sunburn, roughly. But all the people live basically right next to County Road 7. So there's nobody living on the eastern 3/4 of that block that sticks out there. So in some ways, it is less compact, I mean, geographically speaking, but when you look at the population and where it's located, everybody lives on the western quarter of that piece of 5 that sticks out. So I really personally wasn't too bothered by it because that's where the people live. It does make it look a little funny though. And then District 4 is the remainder. It just goes from Dinkle south between 344 and Quail down to Cayenne Cantata, and that's the old municipal boundary between Cayenne Cantata and Sunbird, and then down to the county line south of I-40. So that's Plan B. That's just a different perspective, trying to get you different ways to look at the town. I know. I think in the proposal we said we'd give you a minimum of 2, and I thought, well, let's try 3 and just give you yet another option. This one, I thought, well, what happens if you take District 1 and instead of going down to Venus, making a district just north of Venus, why not take it south of Hill Ranch all the way down to Dinkle and try to stay west of 344 if possible. And so that's what this one looks like. It's Ranch Road down to Hill Ranch, down to 344, down to that's the Bachelor Draw, I believe, and then follows the draw down to Dinkle, and then Dinkle all the way west to the town of Edgewood limits. So that's District 1. It gained all that population south of Venus and south of the Bachelor Draw. And what it ended up happening is it lost its population in District 2. So District 2, instead of being kind of a southeastern district, now it's really an eastern district. It kind of rotated to the north. District 3 is almost identical to Plan A, except that it needed to give up that big block where the municipal, where your town buildings are located, because District 1 needed to get from Venus down over to the people who live south of Bachelor Draw, right there east of 344 and Dinkle. I kind of look in triangle that goes down to Dinkle east of 344. So the big block that has the city municipal offices is needed to make sure that District 1 is contiguous between the population south of Bachelor Draw and the population north of Venus. I don't really need to talk about 4 and 5. This is identical to Plan A. So it also shows you can leave a couple of districts the same. So in Plan A, 4 and 5 are identical to Plan C, which you can, if you really, really like 4 and 5, then you can take a look at maybe modifying the boundaries between 1, 2, and 3. So I just wanted to show this a different perspective and also just make that point as well. So I believe that's the last plan. And so I'm open to any other questions or comments or thoughts or suggestions that you may have. And thank you for providing the time for me to talk about this. And so open to any questions.
At this point, since we have added public comment as an item prior to adjournment, we will need to take a roll call of the callers that are online.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I just wanted to make it clear, when I voted yes for public comments, that was for public comments, not a question and answer period. That's typically what our public comments are, comments.
Okay, and I guess we can move on. Mr. Sharp, if you are open to questions, I think we can do questions now and call that public comment, if that's agreeable with the council. I know part of this. Yes, Councilor Harmia.
I did have just probably 1 or 2 follow-up questions based on this last half of the presentation. I'll be willing to ask those at whatever point in time. But I do think that we need to still allow, of course, the public to have participation. So if you're willing to have the expert here answer questions for them, I think that would be fantastic. And if there's some that he just needs to get back to people on, then that would be fine too, I'm sure. I think we have up to 6 presentations in the agreement, so, and not that we're going to have you back 6 times, but I'm just saying, you know, if there's something that you don't know right off, you know, that you can always,
Counselor, my hope today was to have Mr. Sharp make this presentation, give this to the community, and have them review it over a period of time and bring it back to a council meeting or even a special meeting in the not too far distant future to discuss. But since we have public comment today and Mr. Sharp is willing to answer questions, I think we can call that public comment, and you may certainly ask your questions in advance. We still will need to take roll. We have a number of callers on right now, at least 4 that I can see, perhaps 5. And then we can get comment from those 4 or 5 people. So, Councilor Jaramillo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Sharp, I was curious, what input data did you receive from the town?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Jaramillo, the input I received was the boundaries, the current boundaries, the annex boundaries, and I was also sent the locations of all the current councilors as well as the current mayor. And because many times that question does come up, I drew the plans without knowing where any of the councilors lived. So I kind of did that on purpose. It's just a clean slate. And so that's basically it. A lot of times the entities or municipalities or counties will just say, try to do your best, try to take into account what you can. And sometimes I just feel maybe that's less of a bias on my end.
Okay, I see. So you received the addresses, but you didn't take that into account. Is that what you're saying?
Right, that's right.
Okay.
Right.
And because I remember back when you assisted us with the Moriarty Edgewood School District, we clearly, showed the addresses of each board member, and each board member had a different district. And I'm not saying that's the way it has to be. But in these examples, I really wasn't quite sure who was exactly where, so it might be helpful to mark them.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Jaramillo, I can certainly create a version of the maps that just puts little dots or stars where the current elected officials reside, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. That's all I have for now. Mayor Pro Tem, if you want to take roll call of the public.
Well, I can certainly ask if any of the other councilors have any questions for Mr. Sharp before we move forward.
I have a question.
Councilor Abraham?
Mayor Pro Tem, were one of the things that you look at economic status of these areas? I couldn't remember.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Abraham, that wasn't one of the things that we looked at for this particular redistricting.
Okay.
That would be, and one reason is we just don't have the data at the level needed
Right.
to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Hawley, did you have a question?
I don't have a question. I would like to say thank you, Mr. Sharp, for the presentation. You did a really good job of giving us the background and your thought process as you developed the maps for us, and it was very clear to understand. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, I guess caller number 3 is the first one on the list. Caller number 3, are you there?
Yes, this is Linda Burke.
Okay, and do you wish to speak to this?
No, I have no questions today.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Caller number 8. Caller number 8, are you there? Hello?
This is Martha Eden. Hello?
Yes, Ms.
This is
Eden.
Martha Eden.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
I just wanted, when you say you're going to get it out to the community, will the plans be posted on the website
Yes, they
so that
will.
we can see them?
Yes, they will.
Great.
Today.
This entire
Thank you.
presentation, I believe, will be posted on the website. Do you
Perfect.
have,
Thank
do
you
you
very
have, do you have any further comment or questions? Would you like to speak to this?
No, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eden. Caller number 9. Caller number 9, are you
Hello?
there?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Caller number
Can you
9?
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, this is Ray Siggers. And my question is, it was similar to Martha's question. This is Eden's question. But will that which is on the website have maps? Because it's very difficult just from the audio to really trace out where these suggested boundaries are. So if a color-coded map can also go on the website, I think that's the only way you can communicate the suggested districts to most people.
Mr. Seegers, the presentation does include maps. And those
And will they
maps,
go on the website?
along with the rest of the presentation, will be posted on the website, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
You're quite welcome, Mr. Seegers. Caller number 10. Caller number 10, are you there? Hello?
This is Cheryl Hubbard.
Ms. Hubbards, would you like to speak to this?
I have no questions.
No questions at this time. Thank you, Ms. Hubbards. Caller number 11.
This is Jerry Powers. I have some comments.
Yes, Mr. Powers.
I'm happy to see that the town is moving forward on this districting plan. I was one of those that circulated and signed the petition for commission manager election. And I recall during that time that some of the planning and zoning members and even some of the councilors had come out against commission manager form of government. One of the things they mentioned was about people losing their ability to vote at large. I understand now those same councilors have come out in favor, for some reason, of single-member districts, which is a flip-flop and a complete change. So I'm wondering, in doing our research, we found that most of the small towns that run on commission manager are voting at large. And talked to them and the city clerks as to why they did that. In small towns, they felt that it was more efficient to do so. So I'm wondering about when these votes will be taken as to electing single-member districts or electing to vote at large.
Well, I don't know exactly how to answer that question, Mr. Powers, because we still have a group of things we have to do, including having public hearings with regard to that. So I don't think there is an answer yet.
Okay, thank you.
And that is everyone, I believe. That would be all of the callers currently. Does the council have any other questions for Mr. Sharp? If not, I would like to certainly thank him for all the work and getting things to us so quickly. And I know you're going to have quite a season ahead of you. Hopefully we can take your information and take the process that you've outlined and put that into our schedule and get things done as quickly and as efficiently as possible and get any questions that we have back to you. Thank you once again. And once again, does any of the council have any other questions for Mr. Sharp before we adjourn?
No.
Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Who seconded, please? Counselor Abraham seconded. We have a motion and a
Yes.
second to adjourn. Thank you all for attending this special council meeting. This is a very, very important topic. And I'll call for the vote. Counselor Jaramillo?
Aye.
Counselor Hawley?
Aye.
Counselor Abraham?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. We are now adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
You too.